ChatGPT has announced that it's testing group chat, meaning it's going to be competing with Slack, Microsoft Teams. This is something you predicted. Can you tell me why they would do this?
Yeah, I mean, with hundreds of millions of users, its stickiness or its retention rate is less than 32%, which is lower than almost every social platform on the planet, including TikTok, including all these ones that have come out recently. So they are seeing that their product that they're releasing, which is their core chat functionality, which only 5% of the people have purchased, is not sticky enough to keep retention. So they're going to spray and pray. I predicted them coming for Slack because that is a place that if they can get into, Slack is where you're communicating with other people, but it's also where a lot of us are using AI naturally to summarize, to review, to enter information. We're all using it to edit our emails. So ChatGPT is trying really hard to find something in their arsenal that is sticky, because so far that ChatGPT going to a browser, finding that browser tab, finding ChatGPT, clicking whatever the prompt that you're trying to find in, hitting enter, and then getting the answer back, that's not sticky enough for them to make $1.4 trillion to recover their debt that they currently have.
Very interesting. So one more move towards this operating system model, but also the consumer model, which, can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Of like Anthropic for business, but ChatGPT trying to get this sticky product.
Yeah, ChatGPT is very obvious playing the operator system role. Every product that exists in their vertical, like Meta is very good with social, and they've done a great job at using features or buying features around your social online presence. Microsoft is very good for the workplace with Office 365. And so Copilot is a natural transition because you're already paying for Microsoft. Why not just pay for Copilot, which is 80% as good as ChatGPT? Well, Copilot's like 40% right now, but the marketing is 80% good. And so that product is going to be lost by ChatGPT. They're going to have a very difficult time competing there for market share in the marketing dollars, convincing companies to switch from Copilot to ChatGPT. It's the same reason that Teams has millions and millions of more users than Slack. Even though all of us startups and all of us small businesses use Slack, the big organizations that are already on Microsoft just use Microsoft Teams. And it's a very natural transition. Google has the workspace, right? They have Google Workspace. We all use Gmail. We use Google Drive and Google Docs. It's very easy when I'm in a Google Doc to just press the button to the right of Google Doc that does 95% as good as what ChatGPT can do. So why do I need to prompt it? What Google is coming up with in the next year is memory, and they're going to start recalling personalization into all of your Gemini apps. So now if you prompt it, a year ago or 6 months ago, you're going to start seeing the memory be more functional in your docs and start remembering things about the information you prompted before and using that for your next or your future prompts. So ChatGPT is not winning there. So they have to create the ecosystem on their own. And then they have to say, now that I have an ecosystem with chat, with Pulse, with social media apps like Sora 2, with all of these places that you're using ChatGPT, stay here. Don't use my prompt and copy paste it back to your infrastructure. Stay on my operating system. It's going to take them a while to get there, and it's kind of a race. They have $1.4 trillion to recover. Can they build enough traction and enough noise before the other companies' large language models are good enough for them to stay?
Very interesting. Love that take. And going to the idea of never leaving ChatGPT, that starts to change things for me. If I have my chat in there, I have my apps in there with the ChatGPT apps, I could see that vision coming to life. Cursor, they just raised $2 billion additional dollars. I think if I'm correct, this puts them at being worth over $40 billion. What people were calling just a fork of VS Code is now worth $40 billion. Why do you think that is? And do you think this is overinflated?
Yeah, I mean, Cursor, first of all, the valuation, as I understand it, got about a $2.3 billion funding round. And if I do the math, it's about $29.3 billion. And so I know the news reports came out there at $40 billion. It's still a staggering valuation. But why is it possible? If you're using developers and they're using an IDE with AI built in, much like a Copilot is, it is very interesting to see who's going to win those races for developers. We use JetBrains here at NineTwoThree. We also use Cursor. We used to use Cursor a lot more before their prices changed. But there are going to be a race for developers' eyeballs in the IDE itself. It's not just a plugin anymore. It's an AI-first code editor, and it's designed from the ground up. That's what makes it really interesting. It's almost like a racehorse that got off to the races before everyone else did. And so if companies are managing their entire code bases and workflows on this, and they're creating the new startups, that is an ecosystem that somebody will not leave. I know specifically Claude Code has this with a lot of companies that I invest in or work with through like a funding round that I'm in. And that is very interesting when someone comes to you with a Claude Code database, because they're locked into that ecosystem. They're locked into Anthropic. And so if Cursor, if you're peeling under the hood, and I don't know the answer to this, but I imagine if you were, and you're looking at some of these up and coming startups that are being built on Cursor, that value has everlasting effects, because if you can count those companies and hope that they become unicorns, that's your new Airbnbs and Ubers and places in which that is going to expand. And you're never going to be able to get rid of Cursor, right? Because if it is AI first and it's managed from the ground up, it's something that you're going to live on forever. So if they have the traction now, they're probably going to keep that traction for a long time.
Very interesting. Speaking of traction, someone who didn't have traction this year is Apple in terms of Apple Intelligence. I have an iPhone, and when I search certain questions with Siri, it has this thing come up that says, would you like me to use ChatGPT for this question? So you hit that, and then it searches ChatGPT. Well, we just saw that Apple allegedly is going to be doing a massive deal with Gemini instead of OpenAI, which to me was like, wait, but it says ChatGPT right now. I didn't see that coming. Why would they do this?
Yeah, we wrote extensively about this about a month before this announcement came out, and we wrote about it in the viewpoint of the prisoner's dilemma. We'll link the post there. But if you think about the pickle that Apple got themselves into, they didn't have the software because internally their teams were not capable of building the large language model. They didn't have AI first products. There's a historical note that the marketing team fought with the product team as they were trying to release the new iPhone, and the marketing team actually leaked ads like specifically touting some of the features that they were promoting, and those features were never created. So Apple AI on its own kind of internally folded, and they weren't capable of keeping up with the speed. And so I wrote in the prisoner's dilemma, you really have two options when you sit in this, right? It's, do you want to out your friends? Are you going to like sacrifice yourself? Are you going to take the hit? Right? Are you going to try to convince yourselves that you're better than you are? Or are you going to trust the other party? And that's the whole prisoner's dilemma. Who do they trust? They have a $20 billion deal with Google for their search. So every time you search on Apple, you're using Google. That's a $20 billion a year relationship that Apple already has with Google. And so the story here, if you peel into this, and if you're hearing this for the first time, this is a very interesting thing. There were two bids for Apple. One was from Anthropic for $1.5 billion. Another one was from Gemini for $1 billion. I bet you Google's actual cost was $2, $3, $4 billion. But knowing that Anthropic came in at $1.5 billion per year tells me two things. One is Anthropic is being considered with the big boys and girls in the world as a respectable private large language model that Apple was willing to trust. And that alone, that leak alone, proves to me that Anthropic has something good going. Because Apple and this deal, if you know how the deal went down, all of the Gemini code will be run on Apple's private cloud compute servers. What is Apple really good at? They don't have to buy NVIDIA GPUs. They have their own silicon stack from the ground up. So they're using that private cloud compute server to install this AI tool that is run by Gemini, and the smarts is run by Google, which is genius because they get the best in class AI model, and they don't give Google direct access to all the user data or the user prompts. Now, what does Google get out of this? They are pigeonholing themselves as the greatest large language model to use from a personal voice assistant. They'll have over 2 billion phones already unlocked with both Samsung and Pixel and the Android ecosystem. And now you're launching the last 3 billion phones or whatever the number is that Apple's at today on Apple. So they will own that button you press that you talked about, and it will go directly to Gemini one way or the other. But the last piece of this puzzle, who did Apple not ask? OpenAI. They weren't even considered. So that shows you something that's very interesting that's happening with the tech giants. They're trusting Anthropic. They're trusting Google. OpenAI is kicked to the curb. So maybe that's why OpenAI is trying to build their own operating system, because nobody wants to play with them.
Why does no one want to play with them?
Security, probably leadership, the direction they're going, the speed at which they're breaking things. And would you trust a company that's seemingly promoting new products, new releases? Have you seen the release? It's like 03, 40, 41, 42, 4, back to 03, back to 41, now 51, 52, 53. Oh, we're going to change this to an all model mode where you press a button and we pick the model for you because we're so smart. That pace is not good for enterprise. It's not good for business. It's not good for trust. It's great for consumers when you're trying to test and move fast. And they're going to do a great job in that. And I will say, just caveat this. We at 923, when we build models, we use the reasoning models of OpenAI. They're phenomenal. They're really good. The reason is Google doesn't have great APIs yet for their model. And Anthropic is just turning the corner this month and last month. They're up 25% in the enterprise ecosystem. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of our models in the next year are built like either 50% on Claude or higher because of the growth that they've had. And same with Gemini, when Gemini finally releases their developer ecosystem. But I think that's all to say that OpenAI really was not even considered for a deal like this because it's just too risky to put money into a company that needs $1.4 billion to break even.
Last thing, talk to me about this McKinsey report. They released the original report saying 95% of companies are not seeing success. They're all failures with AI. Now they released this new report, which had some new findings. Talk to me about some of the things you saw there and what people should be paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, if you paid attention to the 95% of AI products are failing, and now you're paying attention to 88% of companies are using AI. It's like, what are you trying to pull, McKinsey? Who are you trying to help here? Are you trying to like interject yourself as the savior of AI, or are you trying to interject yourself that AI is actually working? I mean, that's an argument for another day. But that specific article that you're mentioning, it says the thing that I took out of it is 6% of companies are AI high performers. And that means that they've achieved 5% or EBITDA impact. That's what's super interesting to me because 24 of our last 27 clients have uncovered more profit than what they paid us. So they have increased their profits by a substantial amount. And they say that 61% of all of the companies McKinsey analyzed are struggling in pilot purgatory. That means that people haven't even launched a product that's capable of managing not just with production, but real users with real use cases. When you do typical product management and you're trying to release a product to market, testing your hypothesis and running through the scientific method and then analyzing the results of the scientific method is the only way you've achieved any sorts of ROI. So if the hypothesis are incorrect, the release is going to be incorrect. So where does that take us? Well, the most important thing that you have to look at from an OpenAI standpoint is why are they failing? Because the ROI of ChatGPT and the ROI of the products that they're putting out isn't keeping the eyeballs and the customers into a place in which they can control or ChatGPT can gain more, I call it LTV over CAC, but lifetime value of their users over the cost they're spending to acquire those users. In most models, and what this report is telling us, is people haven't even passed the point that they're testing against real users. And that's a problem. It's not just a tech problem, it's a technology problem. And so we at 923, like what we really focus on is how do you test this before you develop code? For $25,000, how can you experiment or try to figure out exactly what the product could be? And then once you release the product, test against your assumptions. And so that's what this report, it's like, 95% of AI projects fail. Now 88% of companies are using it. How do we de-risk that? But how do we like move into this agentic shift that 62% of companies are trying? It's all over the place. And I think what McKinsey is really focusing on now is the fact that this is here to stay. Enterprises are using this, and we're going to start to see adoption very quickly. And we're going to start to see the numbers that they put out in this report becoming more and more true of how AI is really being integrated into these companies long term.